Welcome to another episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. On today's episode, I sit down with Eric Papachristos here in Boston, Massachusetts. Eric is the CEO and founder of A Street Hospitality. His restaurant group has some of the hottest restaurant brands in their portfolio. Their restaurants are recognized across the city and America with some of the biggest accolades. Doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue annually, Eric also gives back to charities. He is a true leader with over 700 employees across his establishment. And we're gonna learn a lot today from him. Entrepreneurship, how to build, how to scale, hard work, attention to detail. We're gonna hear everything. So enjoy this episode starting now. My name is George Stroumboulis, and I'm extremely passionate about traveling the world, meeting new people, and learning about new businesses. Join me as I sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about their journeys. This episode of Invigorate Your Business starts now. We're going to jump into this, right? I'm going to start off reading an intro. I would need a few pages to really capture what you're doing, but we're going to try our best here. So today I'm joined by Eric Papachristos, co-founder and CEO of A Street Hospitality, the powerhouse behind over 10 renowned restaurants, including Trade, Porto, Saloniki Greek, and La Padrona, which I went to last night. Amazing. Eric has reshaped Boston's dining scene. His journey began in his family's diner, learning the values of hard work and community before transitioning from corporate finance to building a hospitality empire. Eric's blend of business acumen and creative vision has fueled his success, and his impact extends beyond business. He's raised over $1 million for cancer research through his leadership in the Pan Mass Challenge. Today, we're going to explore his entrepreneurial journey, the challenges of growing a multi-concept restaurant group, and what's next for A Street Hospitality. Eric, thank you for joining me, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're in Boston right now. I got in last night and then basically dropped bags off here and straight to La Padrona, which has been around for about a year and a half.
Correct.
That experience was incredible. Like absolutely just pulling up. I've seen photos online. I've seen accolades online, best this, best that, but just showing up, the Raffles Hotel, beautiful. So it just sets the tone even going up there. And then staff was incredible. Food, we just told the waitress, just bring us everything, just keep it going. Absolutely top notch. So, congrats, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
So talk to me, Boston, before we jump into anything. I feel like Boston is such an underrated city. When you think of American cities, it doesn't really come up as it should, but Boston is like world class. Architecturally, everything. Like talk to us about Boston.
So, I'm obviously very biased, but I really didn't have a matter in the choice of coming to Boston, right? Because this is where my parents immigrated to. But I'm very proud of the city for a number of different reasons. We have shown to be extremely resilient through a lot of economic down cycles. The .com, that I lived through early on in my career, the 07-08 financial crisis, obviously through COVID more recently. And, what I've realized is that Boston is a small enough city where you really get to know everyone, but it really plays in the world stage. We have some of the best universities, obviously, in the world. Harvard and MIT are right here. There's a plethora of universities here. We have a super strong pharmaceutical, biotech industry, tons of private equity up here as well that are founded and have their head offices here in Boston. And, I also like it because it's one of the, or if not the closest city to Europe in America. So, I go to Europe quite a bit, so it's a little bit less of a flight.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing that I used to live in New York and now I'm in California, that extra 5-6 hours is a big difference. Yeah. I know you've mentioned your journey, in various interviews, but I think it's important for people to understand American born, back to Greece influence, and then you came back here and you're not just an owner of some restaurants, like, your financial background, a couple majors, just talk about the progression,
Yeah. I think, all of my success, really has to go back to my family, whether it's my father and my mother and my brother who have, supported, all of the stupid decisions that I've made to date, but also really the family values. And, again, going back to Greece where I spent, my early childhood years there, understanding about culture and the connection between humans and really what food means. So, for me, I really didn't do anything different than just carry on the tradition and the value that I learned early on in the 80s in Greece. So when I came here in America, in the 80s with my parents, my parents were very much family people and still are, obviously. I make sure that whatever I do, that my North Star is, would my family be proud of what I'm doing? And again, I'm not quite sure how prevalent that mentality is in this world today. I'm not quite sure if it's right or if it's wrong, but that's certainly, a big part of where I come from. So I'm fortunate enough to have lived both worlds, sort of the old Greek world from back in the day to, modern day America. And I do spend a good amount of time in Greece. Again, I'm very much, I enjoy their food. I think their food, renaissance over the last 10 years there is marvelous. Some of the amazing chefs, and they have amazing ingredients. So that's also inspiring. So I spent a lot of time there. But anyway, this back and forth, relationship that I have with Greece and the US is really what set my foundation, of my businesses and really my personality. So I don't know if that directly answered your question.
Yeah, but okay, so you guys come back from Greece,
yep.
And then your father he was an electrician back in Greece, and your mother's a teacher here.
Yep.
So you got into the diner world, which kind of opened up this whole hospitality desire.
Yeah. So again, my mom came, we all came. My mom was a teacher, sort of really easier for my mom to integrate, and my dad, had the sort of entrepreneurial thing in him and opened up a little diner, as most quintessential Greek Americans did.
Yep.
And, my dad never cooked. I mean, he was a short order cook at the diner. So he was scrambling eggs and cooking the turkey clubs, but he was never a cook like my mom or like my, grandparents were. So, again, I was a little boy and, really was enamored to follow my dad around. And I really enjoyed watching him run his business and control his business, own his business. And so a lot of that early on, was set for me, or that entrepreneurial thing, was set really on in my career. And then, I just washed dishes for my dad at 9 years, for 9 years. I was never good enough to make it up to the grill.
Not even the fryer?
Not even, no, they would, no. And then I had to leave the suburbs and to go into the city as an undergrad. So, I really only worked for my dad, for a number of years when I was a, young kid. And then sort of our paths professionally never crossed again. I was always in the city. My dad was, out in the suburbs. But, had a lot of that, his mentality had stayed with me. So I bartended my way through undergrad and grad school. My undergraduate is in business, and I have an MBA and then a second master's in finance. I was always very quant based for whatever reason. And so, numbers always kind of came easy to me. And then I started my corporate finance career, shortly after my undergrad.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the diner quickly, like in those 8-9 years you're there, like, what do you think are some true life lessons, washing dishes? It's not just the dishes, but like being in that environment. Growing up, I was on the fryers at like 8 years old. And I remember I oversalted the fries once during rush hour, and my dad yelled at me. And I remember after, I went up to him like, what's your problem? I go, I'm 8 years old trying to help. So, but you learn like sense of urgency, all this stuff, right? There's so many life lessons. Like, what are things that you've carried on since then?
I think efficiency was always important for me. Like, okay, I got to wash the dishes. What is the best way? I was the only person in the back of house when we were in production. So, what is the best way for me to wash the dishes and stack them and dry the silverware and do, like, for some reason, like, process was important for me. And I was like, okay, how do I become more efficient? So that was like one part. Two, and probably the most influential part was watching my father interact with his guests. here I am, a little kid, I'm, washing dishes or, in the fry station. Like, I know what I'm doing, but I don't really see the whole big picture. But seeing my father interact with the guests, that was extremely profound, because it is as pure of a relationship and transactional relationship as it comes, because my father knows that, that $3 sandwich back in that day, he needs to keep X amount of dollars, because those dollars have to pay the expenses, but also have to be enough dollars to carry and pay his mortgage and to pay for my soccer cleats or, whatever it was. So really understanding that relationship with my dad and his guests, I think that is probably the most powerful thing that I've learned through the years. And I try to carry that and teach that to, all the team members in my organization. The guest is the most important relationship that we have.
That's incredible. And from diner seeing that to today, where it's an empire in Boston, it's very known, probably one of the biggest restaurant groups from here. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you go from finance then wanting to get back into this? Mm-hmm. Right? Because was your dad and your mom pushing you to go get the doctor job or the lawyer or this? Right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think they appreciated that I had a job while I was in college, and I played soccer and I did well in school. I think, my parents were just generally proud of my brother and I. And, they were proud probably for a number of different reasons. One was we were, good kids. I'd like to consider myself a good kid, but, we were always progressing in whatever we were doing. So I think my parents knew, all right, these kids are going to finish school and they're going to get a professional job, which is really probably the dream of every entrepreneur, immigrant that comes here, right, is to better the next generation. And certainly I could see that in my parents' eyes. And my brother finished his undergrad, went to law school. My brother's still a practicing attorney. I, on the other hand, got my degrees and was in corporate finance. And then I wanted to shift and go become an entrepreneur. And I opened up actually a nightclub was my first thing that I opened. And so I told...
How old were you at this point?
26.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yep. So, yep.
Yeah. Young.
Single, nightclub.
Yeah.
Ambitious.
And I partnered with these two guys who were much older than me back then. But I had worked for them for a number of years while I was an undergrad. So we already had a relationship, and I trusted them. And so I was working at Harvard and I told my dad, I was like, hey, I'm thinking about leaving this job and, opening up a nightclub. And my dad asked two questions, and he said, or one's a statement, one was a question. First question was, is there any mafia involved in nightclubs? Again, my dad, who wasn't very well versed in, city operations, and this is like in the early 2000s, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot of mafia in Boston, in the 70s and the 80s. So my dad really didn't quite know, but he asked the question, which I thought was, interesting, because I never actually thought about it. Obviously, there's no mafia.
Sure.
But the second thing that he said to me, I still remember it, and it really grounded me. And he said, if you get into hospitality, I will not support you.
Wow.
And again, being an ambitious young guy, in my mind was like, okay, awesome. Watch this. And that actually drove me, and it drove
fueled
me really,
right? Yeah.
Fueled it. Yeah.
But where was he coming from? Like, was he burned? Was it just work that he didn't want you doing? Like, why? Because it gave him a good lifestyle as well, right? Like having that restaurant and...
Yep. In hindsight, I know exactly where it came from now. What we do in hospitality is extremely risky, and it's a very difficult physical job.
Yes.
If I stayed in finance, I would be working 5 days a week. I would have my weekends off. I would have my, 3 weeks vacation a year, whatever it is. Probably in today's environment, I'd be working 3 days at the office, 2 days work from home.
Right.
And who knows, maybe I would have a little bit more of a balanced and structured traditional life. And I think that's where he was coming from. My lifestyle right now, again, I'm the founder and co-owner of this restaurant group. I'm my own boss. I do what I want when I want. And so I lack that structure. And I really enjoy and love where I am personally and professionally. But, there are times where if, like last night I was working till 8:00, I had to go to one of my restaurants and taste the new menu. Today I got to go taste the new menu at Padrona. And then tonight I have a dinner with a vendor. And then our days are, my days typically starts professionally around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, typically with developers, attorneys, accountants, contractors. And then, so I have the regular job, like 9 to 5 as an executive for my company. But then from 5 p.m. until midnight, I have to play the role of the entrepreneur and the restaurateur. I got to go visit my guests. I got to go see how my teams are doing and how they're executing. So I think that's where my father was coming from, is that being in hospitality is not just about running a business, but it's also about taking care of your guests, while they're there. So people go to restaurants, at night to enjoy family time.
Yep.
We are there not enjoying family time. We are there to make sure that you have a good time with your family and with your friends, so on and so forth. So that's where he was coming from.
Yeah, got you. Did you have family vacations growing up when you were at the restaurant? Zero. Same. So I say that in the first time, and I know everyone goes back to Greece if you're Greek, right? The first time I've been back to Greece with my mother, my father, and my sister was last year for a wedding. Never family vacation. Growing up in Canada, Tommy and Timmy and all these kids were going to Myrtle Beach and this and that as a family. It's like, nope, someone always had to be back. Someone always had to. So I get where he was coming from, right?
Yep. That's exactly where he was coming from, because he would either send my brother and I to Greece by ourselves, and him and my mom can just have their a little bit of alone and chill time, or we would go on vacations, with my mom. We went to Disney World with my mom. A few years after we had been in America, and my dad couldn't go because he was working 7 days a week. And so I don't know what it's like to have a family vacation. And the first time that our family was together was actually, recently, years ago, where all 4 of us happened to be in Greece at the same time. But again, I think a lot of that for me builds character. I don't have kids, but, someday, if I do, I want to teach them all of these ethics. I think they're really, really important. It's life is hard, and I think we need to learn how to play hard to make it more successful and fun.
Absolutely. And to that point, so my father was in California visiting from Canada, and we're running around with my daughters to soccer or whatever. And dude, I say this, I get emotional. He turns to me in the car ride. He's like, I never had these moments with you guys like you have with your kids. And he's getting teary-eyed. And I'm like, I have no regrets. Us growing up together shaped us in a different way. You know what I mean? It's just, it's crazy to see. Yeah. So, okay, that's the emotional family side. But you go from there, you're in a club. That's a very demanding, you're there till the wee hours in the morning. Mm-hmm. Were you loving it while you were doing that?
Yeah, I'm not a big... and even back in my 20s, I was never a big partier. I just really liked watching the flow of a business, right? And so it didn't matter if it was a nightclub to me or a diner or a coffee shop or whatever. I just watched, this whole rhythm and this whole dance. And so when I ended up partnering with my partners 20 plus years ago to open up the nightclub, for me, it was I went from being a bartender. I mean, granted, I was, an executive. I wouldn't call it an executive. I was a senior manager during the day with 2 graduate degrees in finance, to now opening up a nightclub. And so when I opened up the nightclub, I never even had experience management in nightclubs. I went from a bartender straight to ownership.
Sorry, when you started the club, though, did you cold turkey stop the other job?
I did.
You did? Okay.
I did. Gave him my 2 weeks, 3 weeks notice.
Yep.
Actually, I think I stayed on and did some consulting work, but whatever. But yeah, opened up the nightclub, and it was sort of very easy for me. Again, I would sort of think about, what would my dad do in that situation? And yeah, it was relatively easy, I thought.
Yeah. So the finances there, with the finance background, was it successful?
Super successful. We had it for 15 years. Because we had a 15-year lease. And luckily, it ended up, our lease ended in 2019, months before COVID. So it was a perfect exit. It was a great long-term path. And I thought that I wanted to do nightclubs my whole life. I was like, I know this business. We all made our money back in a year. all right, I'm going to open up 200 nightclubs or whatever, delusions I had in my head. But what I didn't like was that I would come home at 4:00 in the morning. And so a lot of my interactions, at night were with people that were intoxicated. And, just if you're sober and the other person's intoxicated, it's kind of a silly conversation. It doesn't really get anywhere. So that's when I transitioned into food. And I said, I still want to stay in hospitality, but how do I stay in hospitality that gives a little bit more credibility and a little bit more of a balanced lifestyle? So then I ended up opening up a diner. So I took a second, actually, let me kind of back up. While I was at the nightclub, exclusively there for a year, maybe about a year and a half, but I just wasn't getting enough cycles out of my brain. I just needed my brain to work a little bit harder. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So while I was at the nightclub, I actually went and got a corporate job at a big law firm here in Boston doing finance. So I would work, at 8:00 in the morning. I'd get out around 5 or 6 from the law firm. Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, I'd go straight to the nightclub. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then I opened up a diner. And again, what I tell young entrepreneurs is that being an entrepreneur, there is this gap that you have to go from, your normal sort of life and career to you got to land here as an entrepreneur. And there's this abyss in the middle. And every entrepreneur has to go over this abyss. And what you have to manage is how short or wide this abyss is. And do you have to really take a leap or can you just step over it? So even still to this day, I try to minimize that gap, that entrepreneurial gap. I do it today with as much homework as I can and understand the industry, the sector, the neighborhood that I'm going to go into. But, what I did back then was there was a financial gap. And so I said, I have my corporate job in the morning, so I don't have to worry too much about if this diner is going to be successful or not. Let me just give it a shot. And I had the nightclub, which was successful. So I was, mitigating risk.
Yep.
And so I was able to kind of close that gap between the two. And then the diner ended up becoming really successful. So then after a couple of years, I was like, okay, I don't need to be at the law firm anymore. And then that sort of that's how I started really the big hospitality group that I had.
And that was independent. So you had partners at the nightclub.
Yep.
Right. So you got in there, made your money back in a year, which is incredible. And then rode that for 14 years.
Yep.
And then you got into the diner. Was that solo before?
No, I brought in a partner that I had known, again, I had a really long relationship with this partner. We were in the nightclubs together back in the mid 90s. So we opened up that diner together, and then we opened up a chicken and waffle place, in the outskirts of Boston, and that was very successful. So I've actually used partners, or I've worked with partners really through most of my hospitality career.
So why, and horror stories, any horror stories with them? Coming out of it and you're like, hey, I should have done this different, just about partners. And then we'll talk about your 2 partners today with this.
Partners are really interesting. Again, because of my academic background, you read a lot of case studies on business structures, organizational behavior, all of that stuff. So, and always hire good attorneys. I think that's very, very important. Having partners, I'm going to use an analogy that may or may not be appropriate for your audience. It is like being in a relationship, except that when you're in a marriage, if one person wants to paint the room blue and the other one wants to paint it red, you can make that decision and you can argue that decision and you can say, you know what, paint it whatever color you want. You know that at night there's still love for this partner and that you're going to sleep in the same bed. In a business partnership, you're not going to sleep in the same bed. So you have to figure out the problem quickly. And so you really want to pressure test how good are you with your partners early on in troubleshooting, problem solving, and really in conflict. Does one partner flare up? Does the other partner just walk away? What is that dynamic? And then really bringing in attorneys to make sure that all of that stuff is documented. So, knock on wood, I've had partners in my professional career for 22 years. I've never had an issue.
Touch wood, man. That's, yeah.
Yeah.
But what tests, so that's great advice, but what tests were you doing going into it before the lawyers got involved to say, hey, this person is a good fit because of this?
Most of it is actually just personality. do you get along with this person? I would never advise anybody to just, I met someone and we had coffee and they want to partner and do something together. Absolutely not.
Right.
Absolutely not. You need to have some history together to partner with someone. It's almost like saying, in the dating world, you had coffee with someone and they want to get married tomorrow. And like, no, you gotta have a lot of coffee dates, a lot of dinner dates, and a lot of different experiences with that person before you realize that you want to spend the rest of your life with that person. And it's the same thing in business. So there isn't sort of like one question or one scenario. Most of my partners have been, with the exception of Jody, all of my partners I've had really long relationships with. And there's something about the 8-year mark that is also a big sort of mile marker for me. Part of it is I learned that in the big law firms. They have a partner track and you're an associate for 8 years and then you become partner on your 8th year. My partnerships actually in my company have sort of had this same 8-year trajectory. I'm not sure if it's coincidence, not sure if it's subconscious.
But why at the law firm, what is 8 years? Because I'm entering my 10th year with my partner at my company. So I'm just curious, why 8 years? Have they done studies?
They become partners at 8 years. I'm not quite sure why, and I'm not sure if it's an arbitrary number. Probably a lot of smarter people than I have figured it out. But even in my circles, again, my partners became partners on year 8, and it was not a conscious choice. It was very like, oh, okay, I think you're ready.
Right.
I think you're ready. Let's do this. So it wasn't like, oh, hold on. How many years? When did you start working here? Or okay, let's do this. It was never like that. It was just like, you have this familiarity with this person.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So fast forward now to A Street, this empire. How did you pick these partners and why? Or why did they choose you? And
I like to think that I'm the archetype of A Street hospitality. I met Jody Adams, who is this critically acclaimed chef nationwide. I didn't know anything about food. I was a diner guy and a nightclub guy, and I would just like going to a restaurant. And so, again, she's the only exception to my rule, where we became friendly through other mutual friends. And I was looking to open up another restaurant, and she wanted to do another restaurant. And we said, hey, let's just, go check out this place. I don't know. You want to do one? I want to do one. We had a third partner at the time. And so it happened very organically. So that ended up actually working very, very successfully. And what's interesting is that even early on in my partnership with Jody, she had said, oh, you're going to open up a lot of restaurants, Eric. I forget what context of the conversation we were in. And I was like, no, I mean, I didn't even realize it.
But that wasn't your motivation at that point.
Okay. Yeah. My motivation, even still to this day, is like one project and let's do it really, really well. And then, things happen afterwards. But, people will say that I always do want the new shiny thing. And someone very near and dear to me said, to one of my friends, Eric always gets what he wants. And it's not for anything other than I just work really hard at it. That's it. It's as simple as that. I'm not exceptionally smart. I think I'm exceptionally hardworking. And I think that's what gets me to the end goal. So, with my partners, actually, so my COO, John Mendez, John was an hourly employee for me and worked about 8 years in my organization until he came up with a concept and he pitched the concept. And so he asked me to become partner of his. It wasn't that I asked him to become partner of mine.
Gotcha.
And again, very organic. And, John has a skill set that is really tremendous in emotional intelligence and organizational structures. And again, he sort of came on the 8th year. There's others that we can't necessarily talk about, but yeah, it's, I sort of lead the development of the organization and how things grow and the cadence in which they grow. But it isn't all about me, right? I need the team to grow. Right. I can't, I have, some interesting ideas of what I want to do in the future and where I want to take the hospitality group. but they're delusions if I can't think about what that foundation and who those team members are, because that's critically important.
Right. Having that. What is your elevator pitch on just the portfolio of restaurants you have? Right. Like Porto's this, La Padrona's this, just to give the listener an idea. Saloniki's a chain, right? And that's expanding.
Yeah. So that's a good question. We don't have an elevator pitch, but we stay very focused on the Mediterranean cuisine. Mm-hmm. Italian and Greek is our main focus. So Saloniki is our fast casual, and that was really inspired in around 2015, 2016. And we have 5 of them in Boston. The idea behind that was actually John Mendez, my COO, would come to Greece with my brother and I, and we would summer in Mykonos, and, back when it was cool. We'll cut that part out. And his first time in Greece, we went to a regular gyradiko, and he had a gyro, and he said, wow, this is amazing. Why don't we have this in America? And I never thought about that, because anytime I want a gyro, you just go to Greece and it's there. And it was his idea to do a gyradiko. And so we did this whole exploration in Greece and in Athens and Saloniki about how do we replicate a gyradiko here in Boston. And so Saloniki is our modern interpretation of the gyradiko in Greece. So, people come in and say, well, this isn't a gyro shop. It's not meant to be a gyro shop. It is our interpretation of Greek food. So that's the Saloniki brand. Then Trade is a modern Greek restaurant. Again, that's really inspired by the renaissance of Athenian cuisine over the last 10 years. I just brought my chefs there about 6 weeks ago just to get inspired, because I was there this summer. And I just fell in love with this one particular chef. I'm hoping to bring him here to educate my staff later on the spring. But I fell in love with his food and his cuisine that I had to bring my chefs to his restaurant. So that's what Trade is, really that modern Greek cuisine. Certainly not the foods that my dad would recognize. His generation is like typical, the souvlaki, moussaka, and, all of that.
Is that what you mean when you say the last 10 years, like the renaissance of food, like what it was, the traditional taverna to now?
Yeah.
How would you describe what it is now?
So, it's a cheap way of saying it, but it's modernist Greek. What does that mean? I don't think that they have boundaries except for ingredients, which I really appreciate. What has happened in Greece, and the Renaissance started around 2009. So, and this has been pretty well written. Certainly, I learned more about it through reading publications in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times and watching some documentaries. And I feel that this is true. So this is a little bit of me ad-libbing here, but the economic crisis comes to Greece in 2009, 10, 11. And so you have these young kids who are in high school and in college, which again, Greece has really good academic systems, and they graduate and now there's no jobs. And so then, their parents who have the gyradiko in the corner, who were probably hoping that their kids would find some, modern day tech job or whatever job.
Office, yeah.
Yeah. Those jobs aren't around because Greece hasn't recovered from their economic crisis. So these kids now have access to their cell phones, right? Their Instagram and their whatever other social media. And they're seeing what's happening around the world. And obviously Instagram, one of the biggest targets of Instagram is food, and has been really almost since the inception of Instagram. So now you have these young kids who are 17, 18 years old, 20, 22 years old, who are just seeing food on Instagram and what's happening around the world. And they're saying, hey, you know what? My dad's got a gyro shop. You know what? Let me try something a little bit different. And so I think that culmination is what brought, modernist food to Greece. Some of my, favorite restaurants in Greece, like my dad would never even know that it was Greek chefs.
Yes, yeah.
Nolan has always been one of my favorites in Athens. And, nothing about it is Greek. You walk in there, you don't even know it's a Greek restaurant, but they're using all Greek ingredients and it's their interpretation. There's, Asian influence. And sure, why not bring in some Asian influence? We are living in a world that's almost, that doesn't have any sort of boundaries, right? Because we have our phones, and traveling is a lot easier nowadays. But what I am seeing actually now in Athens is, I think some of the better restaurants now are kind of going into a little bit more of that traditional Greek food. So I think it's sort of like could be coming in full circle. Pharaoh in Athens is one of my favorite, and Stroumboulis. I mean, impossible to get reservations at these restaurants. But
what neighborhood is that one in?
Which one? Pharaoh is in Omonia, like right next door to Omonia.
Okay.
And Stroumboulis is, I don't know the neighborhood, but it's a little bit down near Monastiraki.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. We'll put that up there.
I'm going to Greece next week, specifically just to go eat there.
Just for there?
I'm just going to go eat and come back.
So you guys heard that. He lives in Boston. He's going to fly there. Direct flight still from Boston? You got to connect Germany?
No. Off season, there's no direct flight. So I don't mind. I don't mind.
Yeah. It's okay. I mean, if you got to be somewhere, why not be in the air?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're going to get into Greece. So trade, back to the portfolio. So that's trade.
Trade. Yeah, Porto is our inspiration on coastal Mediterranean food. Okay. So again, in our eyes, it's not just Greece, but Italy. And then you have Spain, you have France as well. And so the idea and the imagination is, what would you be eating in those coastal towns, in the Mediterranean? So that's Porto, full service restaurant.
Yep.
La Padrona. Before we go into La Padrona, there's a restaurant in the suburbs that we have called the Venetian, and that is an American interpretation of Italian food, right? So the traditional red sauce, the chicken parms, the chicken broccoli ziti,
hearty, like nice.
Hearty. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure it crushes, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's like, what I call like the fat kid food.
Yeah.
It's like I like to go there on Sunday nights and just pile on the carbs.
Yes.
Because, the diet always starts on Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
And then La Padrona is our newest restaurant in the portfolio. That was inspired by our travel to Italy shortly before we opened. So we took 4 of our chefs and 2 food tour guides in Italy. We spent 10 days, never more than one night in each city. So we were literally in a van and we just go all around Italy, the whole circumference of Italy.
Jeez.
And on one night we would cook at a Michelin star restaurant. We'd go into the kitchen, we'd cook with the chefs. The next night we'd go to some grandmother's house and we'd cook in her kitchen. So this juxtaposition of technique, and sort of theory and thought process on Italian food.
Where's the TV show on that trip alone?
Oh, yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. Sorry, keep going. But
yeah, it was amazing. We have, and so that's where the inspiration of La Padrona came from. And even the name La Padrona came during that trip. We were, at dinner at one of the restaurants, and the name La Padrona came up, and I asked the tour guide, I was like, what does La Padrona mean? And he looked it up, oddly enough, in the Greco-Roman translator dictionary. And La Padrona is the literal definition of my mother's Greek first name, which is Despina.
Despina.
So La Padrona, which means the matriarch of the house, the woman of the house, the woman hostess. And to us, there's a lot of symbolism to that because Jody, our partner who's female, our executive chef is female. We have a really strong, powerful woman in our company. And we thought that was very fitting. And on a personal side, it's also my mother's first name. So I was like, all right, we got to stick with this name.
Yes.
And one of our guests' favorite dishes is our tagliatelle. I'm not sure if you had it last night.
With the white sauce.
Correct.
Yeah, that was the first one we had with the balsamic. Oh my God.
Yeah. So the inspiration of that dish and why I love that it's our number one seller.
It is. Okay.
That's been on our menu since day one. And the inspiration of that dish was we were in, I forget what city, I should know this, but I forget what city that we were in, Modena, which is, very well known for its specific pastas. And so we went to Massimo's, I think it's a 3-star Michelin, and it was a tasting course. And I think we had, 18 courses. In the last course was a shot of Parmesan cream sauce. Just a shot of Parmesan cream. Again, tasting menu, so you don't really know what you're going to get. But that was the last dish. And we took the shot of the Parmesan cream sauce, and it was effing amazing. It left such a lasting memory in our head. That night, we were staying at a vineyard that specialized in balsamic vinegar. So the day of, like that morning, we were tasting balsamic vinegars all morning. Some vinegars that were aged 80 years.
Come on.
Imagine just like a barrel, and they're small barrels. And imagine you're growing up as like, as a little kid, as an infant.
Yeah.
That barrel has the same juice in there for your whole life.
Yeah. Don't touch that. We're going to sell it in 80 years from now, right? Like,
amazing. So that's how we put that dish together. We were so inspired by the Parmesan cream sauce. We stayed at a place that specialized in balsamic vinegar. So when we came back and we're doing menu tasting, it was actually, I think it was my partner John's idea, and said, hey, let's put those things together. And so the reason that we love that it's our number one seller is not because we think it's an exceptional dish. We think that it is, but we love it because it has a real personal touch to it. Like, we know where that dish was inspired by.
That's incredible.
Yep.
And then we ended the night with the espresso martinis.
Mm-hmm.
Is there Parmesan infused or something?
Yeah.
In the martini.
Correct.
The waitress was saying that, but we were joking with each other. She was amazing, by the way.
Yep.
I'm like, I think she's just lying when she left, but okay, yeah.
Yeah. And, cocktails, cocktail and wine culture obviously play a big part in what we do as well. We always focus on food storytelling, but obviously the beverage side of hospitality is just as important. But yeah, we spent a lot of time with our beverage director, coming up with cocktails and, again, how are they inspired by Italy and what specifically? And I mean, at Trade, it's all about Greece. And so we have to imagine ourselves in Greece, or if it's an Italian concept, it's, what are they doing in Italy? Our next concept is going to be American. So that'll be really interesting.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about, like, you can't talk about that yet, still under development. Okay. Yeah. In Boston though.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're just taking over Boston slowly, every concept.
Yeah.
Accolades for La Padrona and in general. Like, first of all, you, top 150 Bostonians, which is a big deal. Like, Boston is not just a little town in mid-America. Like, Boston is a mecca. That's huge, right? Yep. Just being recognized.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Again, I don't know the qualifiers or the quantifiers that make it on that list, but again, for me, it's not about me. It's my hospitality group, and it's really, the 700 staff members that are able to produce this to our staff and put me up on the pedestal. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. So your background's finance, food when you eat it, but you're not a chef. You're not. Okay. So from finance to the food on the table, how does like a La Padrona or this next project you're coming up with, just walk us through that process from idea, concept, it's American, the brand, the kitchen, the venue, the decor, like you're involved in every step. And by the way, we're having a coffee downstairs. There's a pot, like your mind is always scanning. There's a coffee pot on our table that had mashed potatoes dried on it, right? And you saw the cup, like your attention to detail is on another level, right? So is that across the board with everything?
Yes, as much detail as I need to know in order to make the right decision. So, my other side of my portfolio that we talked about earlier is real estate. And I have a pretty active portfolio there. I don't know anything about real estate, but I had to learn everything about not just the process of how to develop properties, but really the construction and the engineering side. Now, I'm not going to go get an engineering degree, certainly not, but I need to be comfortable enough to ask the questions. And I think generally people in life are nervous about asking questions because they may not sound smart. I don't have any problems or issues sounding dumb. I'll ask the stupidest question. I don't know, like educate me. So I think that's like really, really important. But, I think was your question, how do I work a concept through conception?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very personal for me. So first and foremost, I think I'm always constantly evaluating my company. What resources does the company have? Really from a human capital standpoint, what is their appetite? Because I got 3 million ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean that I should go execute those 3 million ideas because I need support in order to do that. So I really rely heavily on my partners, on the operation side and on the culinary side. So From a structural standpoint, I really need to keep looking at them and see how they're doing. And I have to be involved in the day-to-day. I mean, I'm in the day-to-day literally every day.
Yeah.
But when we are looking at new concepts, my first thought process is, from a business standpoint, how does this add value to the portfolio? How does this add value to what we're doing? And that's really just the business stuff. What really gets me inspired is really on the emotional part of the concept. So, this new concept that I'm working on right now, I am thinking, okay, I am, living in Boston. Where do I want to go eat? Where do I want to entertain? Where do I want to go out with my friends? How do I, want to enjoy my night? What part of the night do I want this place to be? Is it a nightclub? Is it a coffee shop? Or is it a restaurant? Is it heavy on food? Heavy on cocktails? So I think about it really on a personal level, and where do I want to be? And then because of my extensive travel, it's really, what place has inspired me? Can I bring some of that back? And so I start to create this idea in my head of, what is really needed here in the city of Boston. And then I kind of work that all the way through the development. And then there's always a muse when it comes to the design. There's always a muse to each of my projects. So La Padrona, and you were there last night and you didn't tell me.
That's my thing. I go support, and then
Got it. Which I appreciate. So I designed La Padrona and I built La Padrona in a very challenging part of my personal life. So a lot of that, like what's going on in my head and who's the muse. So for me, La Padrona was this particular woman who, I had to envision, what is she wearing? Who are her friends? What does she want to eat? What does she want her full environment to look like and feel like and sound like? Where has she traveled? Does she want to be the center of attention? Blah, blah, blah. So, and, sort of ironically, if you go to La Padrona on any given night, that woman is there at almost every table.
Wow.
And so for me, that is sort of the manifestation. So, with this new project, it's a different woman. What does she look like? What is she wearing? What does she want to hear? Is she loud and boisterous, or is she a little bit more reserved? So the muse part is really important, because ultimately you're building a place not for your own ego. You're building a place that you want to actually see come to life. And that to me is the most fun part of the process. And like, whether I'm at the gym or if I'm driving in my car, building my playlist is like really, really important. So like in my head, I'll have, let's say like the new concept that I'm working on. So I have the visual of the muse, and then my playlist, I'm just like editing and building this playlist, and I'm just getting visually lost in that whole world. And I think that to me is the most fun part of building these concepts.
That's incredible. So you're morphing this on where you're at that point, what you want to envision in the future.
Correct. It's not like, oh, I want Spanish tapas, let's just build a Spanish tapas place. Right. No, it's really, really heavily involved, and it has to be very imaginative, if that's the right word.
Well, I was blown away. Last night was Tuesday night in Boston. No special event, nothing going on. And it was rammed at La Padrona at 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm,
like there were no tables available. Like that's just incredible. Is that 7 days a week? Is that?
Yeah, it's 7 days a week. Yeah. La Padrona is, and we're extremely fortunate, and we don't take any of it for granted. I think one of the questions I was asked recently, was, we just got our Michelin recommendation, last month. Thank you. And, someone asked, what did you guys do to celebrate? And nothing. We were in a meeting with my partners, and they came in to congratulate us, and we're like, okay, great. Thank you. Close the door, and then we went back to our meeting. So, for us, we're not there yet to sort of sit back. As I've mentioned this recently before, it's a reset, right? Every day. So last night you had a wonderful experience. we like right now it's, 11 o'clock in the morning. There's been cooks in the kitchen there for the last 5 hours getting ready for everybody tonight. And then that happens again tomorrow. And the next day it happens every single day. So, that's the challenging part of restaurants and hospitality. But we are extremely fortunate. And, when I talk about the Muses and the creative part, that's what's going on in my head. And that's how I build the overall arching concept. But then John and Jody have, a tremendous amount of work that they need to do. We are food forward and hospitality forward, right? So John has to work extremely hard to ensure that, his support staff can, hold up their end of the bargain. And Jody does the same thing. When we go and eat at our restaurants, which is almost 7 nights a week, our feedback is extremely critical, extremely critical, because there's always room to improve. And unlike, code, right? Let's say we were, a software company or a manufacturing company, you built your widget and then you just sort of like multiply, right? Like
yes.
if you're in manufacturing, you just like multiply that widget. In food and hospitality, you can't do that because it's a very personal and service related business.
It's all people. It's all humans. It's when you're in one of your restaurants and there's something that needs to be fixed or you don't like, do you have a go-to person or is it in real time you're telling that person? Like when you have 700 employees, you have partners, but you're running the ship. Do you have go-to people that handle across all the locations?
So my partners do a lot of that work. So we had a menu change launch at one of the restaurants. So I was there on the first night and there was a lot of misses. And I certainly, the chef came over to say hi, asked me how everything was, and I'll give him straight up, how everything was. The same thing with the general manager. There were some misses in their steps of service. Certainly I'll tell them in the moment if they're asking for it. But really what my job is to do is go home that night, send an email to my partners. And so then they can take that information, disseminate it, and then they can go and follow up on it and ensure that stuff happens. So we're not the type of group that comes in and starts to yell and like, hey, this isn't right or blah, blah, blah. There's a method and we're very methodical. And again, part of it probably comes because actually all of my partners are academics, early on in their career. So we do understand how important process is.
Yep.
And we're all very passionate in our respective disciplines, but we're also very methodical and respectful.
Yeah. And so the hard work, I had read or listened somewhere, I think it was during COVID, you went back to some investors, you're like, look, we're going to lose our shit on this. And then you go home, I'm not going to tell your story. And then like you literally destroyed your back, like because of hard work to bring this around and you proved it. Like, can you tell us about that? Because that is the definition of hard work. You're not just sitting at the top of this ship and like you got down and fixed this.
Where did you find that story?
Yeah, it was true. It's true. Okay. Yeah.
So it was before COVID. We had opened up a concept and we ran it for 2 years and it just wasn't clicking. There was something that we were missing and we just didn't know what it was. And we had just run out of cash and I had an investor meeting. Mind you, all of our investors are like the nicest people I've ever met and the most supportive people.
Because you're producing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because you're good at what you do.
Yeah. And I think we're good people. I think they see us work hard. I think they appreciate that. That's what I appreciate about young budding entrepreneurs is that, it's not, I can go win the lottery, but that's not probably going to happen. Or I can just work really hard. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurs. Like you may have this amazing Facebook idea and become a billionaire overnight. And I'm pretty sure that story wasn't as easy as that.
Yeah.
But, most entrepreneurs have to fight for years to build this foundation. And, do they have it in them? So I think that's what our investors respect about us. And so what happened was we're out of cash and I had a meeting on a Thursday night at the restaurant. I brought my investors in. And I'm like ready to get backhanded, like, you failure or, blah, blah, blah. I said, hey, we're out of cash. We're going to lock the doors tomorrow, sort of a thing. And our investors said, no worries. You guys did your best. maybe the next one will be better.
Oof.
And I was like, hold on, why aren't you hitting me? Like, figuratively speaking. And actually that is what gave me the momentum to say, kind of like what my dad said to me, I'm not going to support you. My investors sort of like patted us on the back and said, don't worry about it. And I kind of wanted to be like, no, watch this.
Yeah.
Watch this. And so Jody and I literally met the next morning and we put a brand new menu together and we put a brand new team in place together and we turned that restaurant around and it's still successful to this day. Where I wouldn't have thought it would be this successful today. But again, I think that's why our investors really appreciate us, is because we do, get our hands dirty. And yes, I was on Expo for over a year, 7 nights a week, to ensure that the quality was going out. And, Jody, was literally cleaning sardines, in the kitchen, and, really turned that restaurant around, and we're extremely proud and successful of it. But yeah, that's a story that I haven't told in quite a while.
That's crazy. So when it comes to hard work, the frontline workers that you have, right, all the way up to executive CEO, what's advice? Because we talked about bartending. I think anyone, whether they're studying to be a lawyer, whatever, you need to do some sort of service type job, right? Know how to talk to people. Being a bartender is not easy, right? You're the first person, they're coming in, you got to make them feel comfortable instantly. And, what are some good traits for someone who needs to get in the service industry to have that will carry over into their personal life, professional life in the future?
Danny Myers talks about this as well, that 51%. I think what makes people successful in hospitality is it has to come from your heart. You want to be able to service people. You want to be able to make people feel good. It's not about that $12 tip that you're going to make at the table, that you genuinely want to fill up someone's water glass. I think that is what makes people successful in this industry as a bartender, but also as a CEO and everything in the middle. From a CEO standpoint or from an owner standpoint, we know that our industry has some of the lowest margins in any industry and some of the highest turnover. And it's this incredibly laborious job of 20-hour days. So we're not doing it because, oh my God, the numbers are awesome. We're doing it because we're genuinely interested in having you taste our food and enjoy the experience. We're thankful that you're here in the space that we created for you in our city, and that we're able to really make you feel at home. And what I tell our staff all the time is that our goal is to make people feel like they're at their grandmother's house. Because that's what having dinner is for me.
Right.
That feeling when you walk into your grandmother's house, I can talk about grandmothers for a lot. Like the feeling going to your grandmother's house. She makes you feel loved. She doesn't care what you did yesterday and you got in trouble or whatever it was. You walk into your grandmother's house, she makes you feel like you're the most important person in the world, because you are to her.
Absolutely.
Secondly, is she's going to put this food on the table to feed you. And we forget the power of food. So again, if we go back, and I trace this back to my early years in Greece in the 80s, where we were in an agricultural village, and tobacco was the agriculture. And so it was, it's a very tough job. You're out all morning and all afternoon, and everybody comes back from the farms around 8 o'clock at night. And now you have to sew the tobacco leaves together at night before you put them out to dry. So everyone, huddles around the yard, and the sewing machine is going, and they're sewing the tobacco together. And the grandmother comes out of the house and she has this spread of food, right? And so the importance of that food, a grandmother who is, let's say, 70, 80 years old, she's been cooking probably for 60 of those years. Who do we know in today's world that does anything professionally for 60 years? Nobody. Doctors will probably practice for 20 years. Lawyers will practice for 20, 30 years, maybe 40 years. But nobody does it for 60 plus years. So grandmother has been cooking for 60, 70 years. So she's making these stuffed peppers over and over and over again. And she's tasting and she's tasting. and she's putting love. And so when people say, you got to put love into your food, she's making the food taste so good because she can't wait for everyone to come back from the farm so she can feed them.
Yeah.
She's not just like putting stuff together.
What am I cooking tonight? And her pride, right? Like that's her pride. That's her.
Exactly. Exactly. And there's real love, and it has to taste good because when you come home from the farm, you need to eat it because those calories, that's energy. That's energy for you to wake up and go to the farm tomorrow. And so then you can go, water the plants and do whatever, and then do it over and over and over again. So the matriarch of the house, who, is cooking food, that's the energy of the whole family.
Right.
Right. So they're doing it for 70 years. They're putting love into it. It tastes good because she wants to make sure that you're eating all of your food so that you have more energy to do it over and over and over again. And that, that's a real responsibility. And, my restaurant group is not into, super fine dining. That's a very different level of technique and purpose. Our level of food is we want you to feel like this is home. We want to, find the best ingredients, and we want to cook the best food so you can come and have a great time, and then you can have an amazing day tomorrow and feel good, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Are a lot of your ingredients, do you bring them in? Like you were talking about Italy, the pasta, the balsamic. Are you actually bringing that in?
Yeah, as much as we can.
As much as you can, right?
Yeah.
Do you see yourself, because you've covered this market here, right? Like you're synonymous with Boston hospitality. Is New York an option? Is down south? Are you expanding? Are you thinking international?
It's a great question. Again, it's a personal question, and I have to sort of take stock in where I am personally in my life and what my personal needs are. There is this great fantasy story that I can open up anywhere in the world. But then the reality of that is, how much time do I want to spend on a plane, and how much time do I want to spend, with my, potential future family.
Yeah. Different answer today versus 3-5 years from now. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. My partners, have their respective families. So, and I also have to be very sensitive to that as well. Of course, they'll probably take my lead and say, yeah, let's go do a million things. But I also need to be sensitive to understand that, okay, well, it's not fair for me to put him on a plane every other week to go check out something. But yeah, there is this fantasy in my head that I would like to be in a different city. And I'm not quite sure how much of a reality is. There's, Greece is always on my mind. We're speaking to a couple of different, large things that are happening in Athens right now. But someone told me once, like, you want to, let's say like Athens, for instance. I go to Athens because I'm in love with the city and I'm in love with the culture. So every time I board a plane, I'm like excited because I know what I'm going to go into. Yes. If I now had a business there and the business was stressed, and now I had to forcefully get on a plane to go manage that stressed business, I may have a different experience on my flight over that I'm not quite sure I want to taint.
And that's your happy place. So you don't want to ruin that.
Yeah. And so that's sort of part of the answer. And that's a really big answer. But I think also, New York, it's a great city. I love the density of the city, the vibrancy, the culture, but I also don't know what I don't know. And as good as I might think that I am today, that is going to take a lot of work to be successful in New York. And again, I like to go to New York as I do, like to go to Athens. Do I want New York to become a stressor? And is that going to eat up a lot of my personal time? I'm not quite sure. I think I'm in this phase where I'm trying to balance personal and professional. I think my partners would say that I don't do a good job balancing. I'm very, very professional most of the time.
Yeah.
But
on that point, professional, when people want your time, access, advice, I'm sure people are trying to sell you stuff all the time. Get my product in there, do this. What's advice for someone on how to properly communicate with someone who is very busy and, get right to the point, how to bring value? Like how I've been on a call with you related to lighting, and I loved, there was probably 7, 8 people on the call, different stuff. And, we're talking, we're presenting. You're like, all right, guys, can we just get to the point? How is this going to do that? Yep. And I appreciated that. Mm-hmm. Right? Is that how you are in all your dealings?
Yeah. Personal and professional.
And personal.
Yeah. Let's get to the point.
Does that backfire though on personal sometimes?
No, you get to the answer much quicker. I think I've been burnt not getting directly to the answer. The story has to add up, right? Generally, personal and professional, the story has to add up. And sometimes if you don't ask the question, it doesn't come up.
Music was going, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Being direct, I think, is very important. It is part of who I am, but I think also even my partners professionally, they're all very direct. No, I appreciate it. I'd rather, and for me, I'd rather know if you,
100%,
if you don't like pasta and I'm going to order dinner for us at a restaurant, because I'll usually take control of ordering the food at a restaurant when we go out. And if you don't like pasta, just say, Eric, I don't eat pasta.
Yeah.
All right, great. Awesome.
Done.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't have to be like, well, I don't, just boom, done.
No one's offended. Yeah.
And I think for people having access to my time, I am very territorial with my time because it is very important for me. But for friends and family, if anyone needs me that is in my circle, I'm there. And I say this to my friends all the time. My friends are married with kids, and I'll never ask them to do anything because they have bigger responsibilities than, Eric. But if they ever ask me to dinner, come over, just take a walk, I need to talk, I don't think I've ever said no.
Wow.
Because again, I can talk business all day long, all night long. For me, it's almost second nature because it's something that I've been practicing and studying for most of my life. What's most interesting for me is really human relationships, friends and romantic and even business relationships. Like that stuff to me is the most intriguing. And so I'll give the most time and space to my friends and family that want to talk about that.
Yeah, which is important. You've been amazing with the time. I know you got to get out of here. 3 quick things I do want to cover is one, cancer research, right? And giving back. Entrepreneurship in general. People not just wanting to get into your industry, but just in general. And then COVID. I know those are loaded, but like really quick. So COVID, high level, like what happened? How did you fight that and come out not closing restaurants down?
So COVID was interesting for the whole world. I spent a lot of time at Saloniki early on in COVID, and I think I flew out there May 1st of 2020. So COVID shut down Boston and the East Coast around March 15th. And at the time, the international flights were sort of like almost eliminated at that point. So I was going to Greece, Thessaloniki specifically, on May 1st, and it took me 4 days to get there. And I think that was a big moment for me as well, because I realized that COVID was not isolated in my city. It wasn't in my country. Like, this is worldwide.
Yeah.
But also as an entrepreneur, that was the moment for me to step up in my company. And, every day, I work in my business. It's my job to ensure that everybody is doing the best that they can. And it's my job to move the company forward. It's at my pace. It's at my cadence. However, when COVID came and when these big moments come for entrepreneurs, I think that's our job to shine. It's our job to take all the responsibility and make decisions, executive decisions, to move the company forward. Some decisions may fail and some may be really, really great. But I thrive in that leadership environment. Like, everyone step away, put all the burden on me, have a very strong back.
Yep.
Whatever. And let me make the decisions, and I will live or die by my sword.
Yep.
Totally. I'll always admit, when I'm making mistakes as well. Like that's important. Ego and pride, are important. But you also have to understand when you're making the wrong decisions and you have to pivot. So we also went on unemployment during COVID. My partners and I, we laid off, the whole company, and then we slowly built the company back up, and that's what made us survive. In our relationships, lastly, on COVID, we are in a relationship business. So, I'd gone back to my landlords early in March and said, hey, I'm not going to pay rent if the city is forcing me to close restaurants because of distancing rules, and we had to close down the dining rooms. So I went back to my landlords and said, I'm going to close down the restaurant and I'm not going to pay rent. Here are the keys. If you want, take them. If not, I need a little bit of time and space. And all of my landlords were unbelievably forgiving. And they said, yeah, take your time, do your thing. And it was because they're great landlords, but it was also because my partners and I had built really great relationships. We don't go sign leases with just anybody who is looking at us as just rent money. I'm going to sign a long-term 10-year deal with my landlord if they're looking at me as a value add, not a commodity. So that's important. So we look at that in all of the relationships that we have, again, personal and professional. So that's on the COVID side.
Yeah, amazing. Mm-hmm. So then obviously Empire, doing tremendous business, profits, all this, giving back cancer research, raising millions of dollars for that. Like where did that come from?
So that actually started by my partner, Jody Adams. When we started our partnership, there's a large organization out of Boston called the Pan Mass Challenge. It's the largest sporting-a-thon in the world, actually, that raises funds for cancer. 100% of all the donations that we bring in goes to Dana-Farber, roughly about $100 million a year. And we do that through a cycling ride that we do in the first weekend of August. And it's probably the most imposing weekend because I want to be in Greece, July and August. But I have forced myself the last 15 years that I need to be here and I have to ride this ride. And it's not, my team has raised now over $1 million in the last 15 years. And our team is Jody and John and myself. And we have a couple of our senior managers. We have a couple of investors that ride with us.
Is this the 200-mile bike ride?
200-mile bike ride.
Hadi was telling us about this last night. Okay.
Yeah. So he's on our team and he's a young buck. So now we have to ride his wheel because he's stronger and faster than us. And we love that he even thinks about that. He is someone who has come from Greece, and this is not something that, from what I've been told, that Greeks are really into philanthropy.
Right.
Right.
It's kind of hard when your average Greek's making $1,000 a month and can barely pay their bills. Correct. Right. It's tough. Yeah.
Correct. So when you have someone like Harry who is, now wants to carry the torch of this, Dana-Farber cancer fundraising, it makes us even more proud that what we've done for the last 15 years was amazing for Dana-Farber, but now we also have a team that wants to keep continuing and to do this. So we ride during the summer and we train for it. And first weekend in August, we spend a weekend with 6,000 other riders, and
wow.
We ride all of Massachusetts, or a big part of Massachusetts. So it's a fun ride, and we ride because we can, right? We're healthy enough, and all of us have been affected by cancer in one way or another.
Yeah.
We've lost some teammates to cancer through the years. We've also helped some people get out of cancer that have been in our team. And so it just feels really good. It's a shitty fucking disease.
Horrible.
But if I can ride, I'm going to ride.
And, for you, man. And what can people donate from the outside to your?
Yeah. So, if you go to pmc.com or pmc.org, you can look us up and any rider, and donate. But I usually send out a big email, during, sometime in the spring. I'll put it up on my social media. And again, all of, $100 that you donate, none of it comes to me. It all goes to
that's a big deal
to Dana-Farber. It's an amazing organization.
Yeah, we've got to get that out there. Beginning of this podcast, you said when you told your dad you're going to get into hospitality, he's like, two things. The second one was, if it fails, I'm not supporting you. Yep. Basically, right? Now that you're ultra successful in this space and continuing to grow, what's he saying? Like,
I think he's enjoying it. I think he's extremely proud. I think my parents are very proud of my brother and I. We're good kids. We work really hard. I don't think he really understands what I do. I have a lot of meetings during the day, and he's always like, why are you having a meeting?
Yeah.
Like,
are you part of the mafia? Does he still think you're part of the mafia?
I hope not. He does know that, his kids are incredibly hard, that we learned really great values from my parents. But I don't think, and respectfully so, I don't think they care what I have built. They just care that we are good people and that we're healthy and that we are smiling every day and having fun. And I just think that, that is important. There was one moment in my life recently in 2019 where I was asked to speak at an organization in Boston, which was made up of all men, Greek American men, and most of them were business owners. And I was asked to speak about my story, and uber successful Greek Americans in the room. And I finished my story up on stage, and I come off, and an older Greek gentleman comes up to me, and he says, "Bravo, Skardiria." He goes, "Who are you doing this for?" And that to me was so strong. Powerful. Yeah. Was so powerful because, I don't, I just work hard. I just put my head down and work hard. And in my head, there is this idea that I'm doing this for my family. I don't have a family. I'm single, no kids. But that was such a powerful moment. And the reason that I bring that up is because that is my driving factor. I don't have anyone to pass it on to, but I think about my parents.
Yeah.
And like, my parents put me in this place. My parents put these morals, in me, instilled in me, that life is not about success. Life is about being a good person, taking care of the people around you. Religion is also very important in our Greek American household. So it's just a, long-winded answer to your question. Like, I don't think my parents really care how successful I am, as long as I'm happy and a good person and I'm giving back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, you're saying you don't have, legacy is something I want to ask you about, but your future kid or kids will be super excited and, proud of what you're building right here. Can you talk quickly about The Bachelor?
Just where are you finding all this stuff?
No, but like, how cool is that, right? Like, that's one of the most popular shows in the country. You were on there how many years ago? And did that help you in your business, being known in the area?
No, I mean, it was an interesting how it sort of all came about. I had opened up my nightclub. I was working with a law firm. I had just opened up my diner, and this is almost literally pre-social media. Luckily, it's pre-social media.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I didn't want to go. They were in town scouting and blah, blah, blah. And it was actually one of my partners. I was like, you gotta do this. Like,
good looking guy, fit, single. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you realize that, TV is not, what it's made up to be.
How so?
It's I don't know if my NDAs are still, in play, but it's post-production. There's a lot of storylines that have to be created in order for the audience to be captivated. And because, again, this is pre-social media, the independent creator has no control over what the producers and these large, multi-billion dollar companies can do. Luckily, it was pre-social media. I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Okay.
And I would say probably arguably with a lot of the other cast members as well. We all stayed connected, and it's a nice little community of cast members. I'm not in touch with many of them now, but shortly thereafter. But there wasn't a lot of publicity post-show. I think the biggest thing that I liked was to really play in Hollywood and understand a little bit, see behind, the curtain just a little bit. Having, my face up in Times Square, 20 years ago, like there's like those sort of like interesting things, and being in Time Magazine and like all that stuff. But I wouldn't say that it helped me in my entrepreneurial sort of pipeline. I think if this happened today, maybe, but again, being a public profile, which I would argue that I'm not, but having any public exposure is very risky, and I actually don't necessarily like it. I know that people attach to brands when they know sort of the story behind it more. And that's really what I want to expose when I am sort of in my social media channels or doing any interviews. I don't expose too much of my personal because I really want to hold that sacred. And that was one of the moments, being on that show, was that you have to expose your personal side for better or for worse. And most of the times it's worse.
Right.
So it was a wonderful experience. If I could play the game, I would do it differently. But certainly if I was asked to do something today, I would 100% say no.
No. Yeah. That's your personal.
Yeah.
Amazing, man. Okay. Really quick. A quick little just rapid fire. I just want to know and why. And it's based on how you're feeling, where you're at today, right? Mm-hmm. So like based on some foods and stuff. So overall, a good gyro or a good burger?
I hate rapid fire because they're like, I want to ask like a million other questions. I'm going to say a good gyro.
Yep.
Yeah.
And where are you having it? Like where?
In Greece and Thessaloniki.
Thessaloniki. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Baklava or cheesecake?
Baklava.
Baklava, hands down. Okay. Bugata, by the way, in Thessaloniki. That's my final dessert on this planet. That and ekmek, kataifi. Oh, dude.
Yes.
Fine dining or a neighborhood spot?
Both.
Both, right? Yeah. What's your, not in your portfolio, what's like one of your favorite restaurants in the States?
We were just talking about this. The Grill in New York City.
The Grill, I've never...
It's I would call it a modern American steakhouse. It's by the Major Food Group, which again, they're they are leading the way in restaurants and hospitality across the world. So it's a great group to sort of chase behind. It's a modern American steakhouse, but it has a lot of classic steakhouse elements that you feel like it goes back to the 40s. It's a fine dining steakhouse experience. And I can appreciate those at times. There are, I would say half of the times my dining outside of my restaurants are casual.
Yep.
But then the other half is fine dining. What I appreciate about fine dining is that it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to be so proper. Like, you want to cut the bread with your hands, cut the bread with your hands. And eat. I really appreciate, I don't like when I'm going out to dinner with someone who doesn't, I don't eat that.
Right.
I'm on a whatever diet. I get people have allergies. I really get that. But food is there for you to enjoy it, get messy with it, eat it any which way that you want. And again, it's interesting because when I go out to dinner with my partners, you'd think, these are Michelin. We have New York, La Padrona got New York Times top 50 restaurant in the country.
Come on. That's huge.
Yeah, huge. That's
congrats, dude.
Amazing accolade. So you'd see Jody and John and I at a restaurant and like, you'd think that we'd be these like precious eaters. It's like, no, we're like, I'm dipping in Jody's food and John's like eating, we've got straws on the same drink. Like,
that's amazing.
Like that. Because again, I take it back to my grandmother's house. Like, what would I be doing at my grandmother's house? I'm not going to be like,
Hema, just going. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's incredible. A couple more here. Shared plates or entrees?
Shared.
Shared. Best, right? Yeah. Absolutely. Wine or cocktails?
Both.
Both.
Yeah,
okay.
That's a cheap answer, but both.
I like it.
Yeah.
And then what kind of cocktail? What's your go-to?
Right now, I'm kind of like a little bit of a Paloma.
Okay.
I like that citric acid of a grapefruit. It feels light. It feels refreshing. And it's really the grapefruit, maybe with a little bit of a splash on soda on top. A good Negroni also, but I can get carried away with a Negroni. I can have 2 or 3 in a sitting.
Yep.
Because the balance is so good. It's not an umami profile, but there's something about Negroni, and that's why they've been around forever. They have this character in them that they're very well balanced that you can't almost stop drinking them.
Yeah. I don't know. Lately, I'm enjoying Aperol.
Yeah.
I don't know, like the spritz or whatever, just as a get it started type thing.
Yep.
And then final one, frappe or Freddo, espresso?
I'm going to go with Freddo. Because I like the process better. The frappe, it's instant coffee and it's typically Nescafe. It's probably not a high quality. single origin bean, that's been chemically processed and dried freeze. You can go to some great, even in Katerini and like these like small cities in Greece and find great roasters and people who are really geek out about their beans and their water temperatures and their espresso machines, and they can make a really, really killer Freddo. And that's why I like the Freddo.
And you like that one?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. And then final one, where's A Street Hospitality going to be in 5-10 years from now?
That's a great question. I'm going to leave a lot of that to my personal life, and I'm going to have my personal life dictate where my company goes, because I'm at a point right now where things are going really well and we are hitting on all cylinders. And if I don't look on my personal side, I will be, overly consumed on my professional side. And so maybe there is space, but I have to consciously make space for my personal side.
Yeah.
And so, we are going to, responsibly grow. But we'll see, how far I want to put that, pedal to the metal. I'm not quite sure. It's kind of, again, a sort of a cheap answer here, but, and it's also an active discussion with my partners as well. Yeah. Like, they have their personal lives, that I have to be very mindful of, in how we grow the company. So, we don't know, but we are enjoying the process. We're having fun. We're eating a lot. And we're serving our communities. And I think that, to me, as a Bostonian who have lived in downtown now for 30 plus years, I love when people come up to me and said, "Oh, I went to your restaurant last week, da, da, da." Like, that to me fills me. Like, sometimes, there would be a concert in town and the singer will say, "Oh, up on stage," and this has happened twice in the last year, they'll reference one of my restaurants. Like, "Hey, I was at Trade last night at dinner," and da, 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 like, and so someone will text me like, "Hey, I was at this concert and they mentioned that they went to your restaurant, da, da, da." And that I love, because it makes me part of the community. And like I said, earlier, that's, this is what we're doing this for. Yeah, it's for our community.
That's huge. Any Celtics or Bruins frequent the restaurants that you know of? Any?
A little bit of everything, or everybody. Yeah. Boston is such a big sports city, and we take a lot of pride in our sports teams. Yes, yeah, but we're not. None of my places are the places where we get that type of attention, and we certainly don't publicize that attention. Right. We want people to just enjoy their time. This isn't about showcasing it.
Amazing. So it's Iraklis.
Yes.
You dropped that?
I did. Well, no. When I came to America, my legal name still is Iraklis. But when an American sees the spelling, which is Iraklis, they would pronounce it Iraklis.
Iraklis, yeah.
And so as a young kid, I was like, Iraklis, I hate the sound of that. And I was watching, when I came to America in the 80s, a TV show called Chips.
Oh, yeah.
And Eric Poncherello was the main character, and he had long hair.
Yep. And
rode a motorcycle, and he was a police officer. So, like, what 10-year-old kid doesn't like all of those attributes? Yeah. And so I would see his name on the credits, and it said Eric Estrada. And I said, "Hey, Mom, can they call me Eric?" And she's like, "Yeah, if you want." And that's how Eric sort of stuck. And phonetically, it sounds like Iraklis.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. We're going to put your socials up there. I appreciate you sitting down.
Of course.
Keep rocking, man. You're inspiring people out there for sure.
Thank you, George. Great job.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons and follow me on all the main podcast streaming channels. Also, please share your comments when you can. I appreciate your help in expanding this network to a worldwide audience. Until next time, stay invigorated.